minute, yeah. Yes, hello everybody. Welcome to Around the World webinar, one of the series that Communication Working Group is organizing with different working groups and chapters of MCAA. Today, we will talk about slow science and how we can rethink science policy and research careers for sustainable research careers. Just briefly to say about the schedule. So we will have about half an hour talking with our speakers and presenting themselves and their work related to the topic. And then we will have open Q&A with everybody for more interactive discussion with our speakers. And then we will close with some key messages, take-home messages. So few words, if you permit me to say, what this webinar is focusing about and what it means slow science, what it means to go slower that helps to move forward, and how to rethink all about science policy and research careers. We are in accelerated rhythm of discovery and pressure. We want to produce rapid results, usually in science, but in contrast, the concept of slow science offers us an alternative and quite compelling. So this webinar will try to explore how to adopt a slower, more deliberate approach for our research, how we can reshape. We want to reshape a bit our science policy and support and make more sustainable and fulfilling research careers. So we want to focus more on quality over quantity, and exactly this what slow science is emphasizing with a deep collaboration with multi-sectoral domains, so that will help us for long-term and impact principles, especially in addressing complex global issues that we are dealing with in science, some of us climate change or health or even social justice. And exactly this webinar, we are focusing more on the early and mid-career researchers, that is our MCAA researchers, also non-MCAA members could join. And with this session, we try to explore exactly the slow science and how it can influence the research assessment and more funding structures to help for our careers, and even institutional practices, if we can make some suggestions. So all the attendees can participate and can change views how we can build more impactful research careers and how we can help each other to advance our sciences and have a better scientific progress. So let me introduce our speakers shortly, and then each speaker can devote a few minutes to present themselves in the right way as they want. So the first speaker is Sandra Montón Subías. She's a research professor in Universitat Pompeu Fabra in Barcelona. She's a leading, I have my notes, archaeological theorist exploring colonialism, gender and material culture, and champions in inclusive reflective academic practices. And the second speaker is Sergio Crespo-García. He's assistant professor, Université de Montréal. He's a biomedical researcher focusing on degenerative eye diseases and advocates for a quality-driven research culture in the life sciences and in general. And the last but not least is Annelies Van de Ven. A lot of us, we know her as policy officer from European Commission, and she's trying to bridge academic research and policy making. As I said, is working for European science policy and can enlighten us a bit more about research evaluation, sustainability, since her background also is connected with archaeology and museum studies, can give us more views from the social science and humanities. So I had just this briefly, these slides, because I want to give more time to our speakers and to all the participants for more discussion. So let's move on to the first speaker, Sandra. Please, if you can share your slides or share a few words about yourself, your work, and your perspective on this topic of slow science and research careers.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here, and thank you, Theodota and Sabina, for the organization and for the invitation. And as you can see, I'm a research professor in archaeology, but I still have very vivid memories of my earlier stages, and I'm also working with PhD students and early career researchers, postdoc early career researchers. So I think that the negative impact of the neoliberal logic in academia has long been noted. But I think that in recent years, this discomfort has become a shout due to the ever-accelerating pace it demands on us. It's never enough. We never do enough. So together with others, I'm very much worried with these dynamics. And the first time I expressed concern was in 2012, when I wrote a paper, this paper, with a PhD student that left academia after her viva. My interest also stems from my concern to feminist archaeology, to feminist ethics of care, and the collaborative approach of maintenance activities, and also from working with Chamorro indigenous communities in Micronesia, where it is a value to prioritize the community over individual achievement, and of course, of being a female researcher in a highly masculinized environment where this fantasy of the independent, successful, self-made man scientist has long prevailed.
Sandra, excuse me, we don't see the slides are moving. Perhaps can you try to reshare the screen again?
Also, the sound was perfectly okay. So we could...
before it was okay, now it isn't. So now you see, can you see this slide?
Only the first slide, Sandra.
Only the first. You don't see here my personal history.
No.
I'm so sorry.
Perfectly okay.
Okay, I'm going to reset it. Compartir pantalla. Now this is the first, and I'm going to the second. Can you see the change?
Still nothing.
Still nothing. So I'm afraid.
Go to the presentation mode and then try.
Yeah, I've done it. Oh, I understand what you see. No, it won't. I will, let me check. Let me check once more.
So in the meantime, maybe I can give some questions for the audience to think about. This, what comes to your mind when you think of slow science? Now we can see your second slide, Sandra.
Oh, you can see this picture of Munch? Okay.
Have you experienced pressure, prioritizing speed or volume over quality in your work? And what in your mind comes as successful, slow research career? So just some questions that you can think about and you can answer later after the speaker's presentations. Please, Sandra, you can continue.
Okay, this was the slide I choose to illustrate this shout, this discomfort, and then my personal history. I have thought about this, and then also, I don't know if I show this one, but I identify, like many of us are aware that which are the academic pathologies that the fast academia is experiencing. We all know that we are publishing at a pace that nobody can follow. that we are hyper-accumulating resources. It is not more or not only to publish or perish, now is to be a PI in as many funded projects as possible or perish. And for instance, recently I was in a university meeting where research achievements were shown for professors, and it was only about money, nothing about research. And I think this is very dangerous, because instead of seeking money to fund our ideas, we are trying to adapt our ideas or to seek ideas that fit funding schemes. Also, deadline fatigue. I think this speaks by itself. Administrative burden, temporal myopia, and citation amnesia. So we are pressed to publish the last scholarship, forgetting many times the previous one. So genealogies of thought are being lost. Also, power abuse and harassment. I think much has been written about it. I just want to mention that these are not exceptions to the fast academia. These are maybe its more grotesque expression that is experienced disproportionately by young females. Endogamy, racial, gender, and non-functional diversity endogamy. And although slow science proposes measures to cure, to heal these pathologies, these interconnected pathologies, I find, and many people, many scholars find very difficult to break free from this rhythm. It's like a spider web that traps us. So I think that some measures to overcome this fast academia is to embrace the ethics of care and treat researchers not as resources owned either by PIs or by institutions. For instance, it is very common that my colleagues and myself say, I have 4 PhD students in my research project, when what happens, or what I believe it happens, is that 4 PhD students are working in a project that you coordinate. Prioritizing quality over quantity, and discouraging hyperproductivity. Relevance-based publication, making explicit what research contributes to your field and also to social knowledge in general. And to me, innovation, this obsessive focus on innovation is not enough. We should go for relevance, because innovation many times is not meaningful. And I've been assessing projects where I have found innovation, but not relevance. To me, it's necessary that there is a degrowth in academic events, incorporating diversity, because it improves science. It's not only a question of social justice, it's a question of improving science. And of course, investment in early career stability with longer term positions. It is not healthy that you have, or that early career researchers have to change their home base every 2, 3, 4 years for 20 or 25 years, to value invisibilized work, to the growth administrative burden, and to find communities of peers that break this isolation and this extreme individualization that brings anxiety. So, and this last point, I would like to connect this last point to a research project that I have been awarded recently, is the project Magma, where we are trying to implement some of these measures in la medida de nuestras posibilidades. I don't know how to say this in English, I'm sorry. So this is our initial program for a slow archaeology and a slow science. The first thing we have done is to jointly develop a protocol together with the PhDs, the postdocs, and the PM in the project to try to make a comfortable, attractive, and supportive workspace, flexibility and clear planification. We are trying to implement a sustainable publication policy. And if we have time later, I can talk a little more about this. Also, we are incorporating rest as part of the workflow, rest for well-being, including mental health, which is so important. We have joint time for reflection and debate. Also, we are trying to implement this issue here, mediation of discomfort as part of ethical research practice, but this is in process because we have not found yet how to do this. Acknowledging failure and uncertainty as part of the workflow, and of course, enhancing these values that are the values that we try also to enhance in our theoretical research through the collaborative approach of maintenance activities. Very important to us is celebration, no? Acknowledging also what we have achieved and not rushing from one achievement to the next one. So thank you very much. I look forward to your questions and to the debate.
Thank you very much, Sandra. It was a great presentation.
I'm sorry for the technical problems.
Yeah, maybe you had also nice animations, but already what you presented, it was a lot of food for thought and reflection. So it was quite compact. You had everything. That's excellent. If we don't have an urgent question, I would say to keep.
Yes.
I don't know if Monica would like to say something, but I would suggest to.
Yeah, I will ask at the end.
Okay, that's better because then we will know how much time we have. So now I think it's time for Sergio to share his career pathway and his reflection on this quite complex but very important topic for all researchers.
Yes, so thank you so much for inviting me to participate in this webinar because I think it's very relevant. So I hope you can all see my slides and that they will be passing without technical issues. Well, my name is Sergio, as Teodota has kindly introduced me before, and besides a researcher, also I'm a part of the board of directors of the MCAA North America chapter, so I'm presenting from Canada, contrary to the most of you that are in the PM already. And I wanted just like to put this title a little bit to contextualize the topic of today, like the gas pedal of science, you know, like when will I be able to use the brakes? Because unfortunately, from my perspective, like I'm sort of pushed to have a fast science like track. And my presentation is going to be slightly different than Sandra's presentation because I've done something more testimonial, just like to a little bit talk about the topic from my eyes. But because I didn't know how to start the presentation, I just asked ChatGPT basically about who I am, and this definition was coming up. So it's quite accurate because it's defining basically a little bit my topic of research, you know. But interestingly, it's not so clear here, basically, the productivity, like the relevance in the field, or like, so to say, how famous or successful you are in the field. Funnily, I found that it also talks about my personal interests. So it was also saying that I enjoy ceramics, gin, and insect collecting. So this was something fun that I didn't know that ChatGPT would catch. But just like to put you a little bit more in the context of who I am, I think that talking about my training would be the easiest. So I did my bachelor's in biology. in Spain, and rapidly I moved into my master's, and I really fully dedicated myself to research in Madrid in 2012. So at that time, I already started to realize the importance of getting scholarships. So I got the Aisha Foundation scholarship for my master's, and rapidly after that, I started to look for PhD positions. So unfortunately, at that time, Spain was undergoing a lot of problems, finance-wise for research. So I started to look actually abroad. And I got a few offers, and finally I accepted a Marie Curie scholarship in Berlin, where I did my PhD, and it's when I started to dive really into the topic that I'm dedicated right now. After that, well, during the PhD, because of the nature of Marie Curie scholarships, I was lucky to have different secondments, but one secondment that was central to my career was at the University Queen's in Belfast. And I learned to a great extent the importance of doing this type of network and this type of mobility, basically to be able to learn and to adapt to the times. It was in 2017 when I basically took the plane to the other side of the Atlantic, and I started my career here in Canada at the research center of the Hospital Maisonneuve-Rosemont, which is affiliated to the University of Montreal. And as you can see here in the slide, I tried a little bit to put also and to emphasize the importance of getting scholarship after award, because basically this was the only way that I could have continuity in academia and not withdraw from a world that it's basically a puddle full of sharks. So the struggles were real, and I think I've been extremely lucky because I had excellent mentors. That's why I put their pictures there, because I think that thanks to them, actually, I am where I am now. And I think it's something important to acknowledge. So just to put you a little bit in the context of my research. So I'm a cell biologist and geneticist, and I work with retinal vascular disease. So this is such as age-related macular degeneration of diabetic retinopathy, which are pathologies that most of us has heard. So these pathologies in the retina have a lot of impact in the well-being of people, because getting blind is not nice. And our society, it's highly not accessible to blind people. So the problem with this type of pathologies is that there is not many treatments. So here in the middle, basically, I just put the two main treatments that we are using right now for this type of pathologies, which consist on basically burning those parts of the retina that are not working. So the retina doesn't get worse, but doesn't really recover. Or to inject basically drugs directly in the vitreous, in the inside of the eye, to try to sort of control the circumstances that are leading the pathology. None of these therapies are actually fixing the disease. They are just delaying the onset of further problems. So what I dedicated my career was to find new targets that we can use to treating this disease, and to see whether we can translate those targets to druggable strategies and to bring that to therapy. So this is just an example that I like to illustrate, because at the end of the day, my research consists on making something that we built in the lab translatable to the clinic, but at the end having a repercussion to human. So my career basically was very much around this topic, and the industry, it's very, very important, because at the end of the day, when you want to bring this to the clinic, you need to pass by companies. So this made that the field that I chose and that I love, it's highly, highly competitive with a lot of financial interests. So this was not easy in the context of getting scholarship, in the context of getting funds, because at the end of the day, there needs to be also something for the companies to gain. So it's very different than other fields in academia, where it's more the pleasure and the vocation of discovering or advancing a field more from a basic perspective, because here there is a very highly a money-driven interest. And just to put a little bit in the context, I asked Google like what's telling Google Scholar about my productivity. So I'm a 35-year-old. I was born in 1990. Like I finished quite fast my bachelor, my master's, my PhD. I had a successful postdoc, but I don't have crazy a lot of publications. I have, I think, 33 or 34 publications, like peer-reviewed, you know. But I think that the quality of my publications has been relevant because actually like my postdoctoral work has led now to clinical trials, and my doctoral research was funded partly by Bayer because there were a lot of clinical applications. So I'm quite satisfied of what I've done, despite I don't have 100 or 200 papers. However, what Google Scholar is not telling is that there were a lot of rejections to get there. So to publish each paper, I can say that maybe I submitted to 3 or 4 journals before having the journal that would be interested in publishing that. So this is something that I try to tell my students all the time, that the fact that a journal is not interested in your research doesn't mean that the research is not interesting. And I think that this is highly aligned with this like slow versus fast culture that we have in science, because at the end of the day, the publications and like how basically different editorials regard our work defines a lot what's our productivity. And I'm coming back here to my mentors actually, because I think that as human, we basically learn from our environment. And I think that the mentors in academia play a central role to that. So we look up to them. And these are basically the examples that we try to imitate. So I just wanted to like put in this slide a little bit the citations and the H index, because this is one of the few like quantitative approaches that we can have to productivity in academia. And you can see that all of them are extremely successful in their respective fields. They have a lot of publications, they are very well regarded, and I didn't have space in the slide to put all the many awards that they have. But this is like putting a very high threshold for me to reach, and it's something that subconsciously pushes you towards always wanting more, because you are supposed to reach the point that they reach in their respective careers. Well, so to say, I've been extremely lucky, and I think that my hard work also paid off, because I wanted to become professor, and I'm professor right now. But to reach this point, I had to demonstrate a lot of things. And they were not so much a demonstration to myself, but to the system that has been built basically to determine whether I should be professor or not. And some of these are like to have top tier publications, very strong recommendations and endorsement of peers, and a very strong research program. And this strong research program, actually, it's important to take into account, because what universities and faculties are going to be looking at that is whether different organisms and foundations are going to be interested in giving you money to do your research. So this is something that conditions also a lot whether you're going to be hired as professor or not. So around 3 years ago, I was appointed as an assistant professor at the University of Montreal with tenure track. So everything was on point. However, something that they don't tell you is that after getting the job, I had to teach in a brand new language, because French is my 5th language, and learning a new language, basically, when you are over 30 years old, is not an easy task. And since I'm on tenure track, I have to teach. So that's not a negotiation. And to start this very strong research program that was going to be attractive for different organisms, they gave me 30,000 Canadian dollars. So as you can already like imagine, with the nature of my research is very expensive, because I use a lot of in vitro models, I use animal models, and I also do partly clinical research. And basically with $30,000, you can pay the salary of one PhD student for 1 year. So it's like it would be like a cheap salary, to be honest. Like that PhD student would be struggling by the end of the year. But it's not realistic. So my first 3 years of being a professor has been a little bit like the life of a beggar, because I had to be asking for money nonstop. And this is not so bad in a way that, as you can see here, I just like put a little bit of the funds that I obtained independently, because that's another thing that you need to keep in mind. Once you become professor, you need to show that your mentors are not the network that you are using basically to support your research. So I had to cut all the links with my previous mentors because that's not well regarded also. So all that friendship, networking that you build up during your graduate studies, during your postdoc, serves for nothing because you cannot take anything of that baggage you have because you need to prove yourself as an independent researcher. So this is quite damaging because I think that it's a big problem of the system. I managed somehow, so you can see here that I got several awards at a national, at a provincial level, and the ones with the star are the ones that are like relevant awards that were over 100K Canadian dollars. So my lab has been working on this in the last 3 years, and I'm very thankful to that. But the writing investment, it's a lot. Each grant took me between 10 and 60 hours, and I was generous because some of them took a little bit longer and required to prepare letters of collaboration, partnerships, to have preliminary results. And nobody really tells you that. You need to throw yourself and you need basically to convince strangers without having the support of your previous mentors that you are capable to do what you want to do. But what I didn't put here before, it's all the rejections I had. So all these in red were also hours, were also letters, were also results that I generated in the lab and that were not considered. So this was a very heavy thing to manage because, of course, we are human and nobody likes to be rejected. It's not only on the dating scene, like it's also like at all levels of our life. Like nobody likes to be told that your research is not good enough. Your results are not convincing. You are not proving that you have like the necessary network for that. And these are just like some very general comments that I received, but very consistently, like they are actually like a ChatGPT generated and used by many reviewers in different grant competitions. Well, I didn't give up and I still keep sending a lot of applications, and hopefully if I can share this screen in 1 year, I will be able to have more greens than reds. But this is a reality that should be like very openly shared because this is part of all the stress that we are having basically to do our research. But this means also a lot of work. So I was doing calculations and I had one deadline each 12 days since I started my professorship. This includes also like many other deliverables related to committee work, because I also have to participate as a reviewer in many grants, many scholarship calls, also progress reports, because once you get money, you need to say how you spend the money. Basically, this is a lot of work. And I'm just mentioning that because with my contract, I'm paid for working 35 hours a week. However, the reality is very different because in these 35 hours, I need to do teaching. I have a lot of credits a year to be teaching, and actually that's supposed to be like the primary like a job when you are on tenure track. I have to do research because it's also one of the like pillars of the academic positions. I need to do outreach, and this is not necessarily to the broad public, like outreach at academic institutions in Canada, at least. It's also implying like how many research conferences you go, the type of like international grants you have, international collaborations. But I also have to prove that I'm an asset for my institution. And this means that I need to be in committees, like supervising graduate students. I need to be also basically helping the institution to function. So this is something critical that basically it's in the small letter of the contract, which means that if you don't succeed in all those 4 pillars, you may not be renewed in 2 years. You may not be promoted to the associate professorship in 4 years, and you may never get the full promotion to full professor basically after 8 years. But overall, we have the archetypic publish or perish, because how can you demonstrate that? So the point I was just like trying to reflect here a little bit with you is that we are basically put in an Excel file and we are evaluated quantitatively. So they want numbers and they want to have how many graduate students, how many hours you teach, how many committees you participated, how many grants you got, how many dollars you have in your bank account in the lab. And they just care about numbers. But in the contract, still there is 35 hours a week. I can already tell you that I work much more than 35 hours a week, and my average is between 65 and 80, depending on the time. And I'm lucky enough that I decided to do not have children. I have a relationship, and with my husband, we both are very like work driven. So he's also very understandable of my needs of working most weekends. I have a lot of flexibility that if I would be a dad, probably I wouldn't. So I'm okay, but this is not sustainable. And I can see how many of my colleagues here at similar stages of my career are having a lot of problems. So just to follow up with the line of today, can I really afford to go slow? So I think that from my end, the answer as of today would be no, because that would mean basically that I cannot continue advancing my career, because you have so many checks in the list to do that you can simply not afford. However, my goal is to say yes, and I'm trying actually to educate my students that having vacation is important, that not working on the weekend is important, and that milestones should be taken also as a checkpoint, not as a source of stress. But I wanted to finish my presentation with some other fair questions that I would be happy to discuss further later in the round table, which are basically whether do I like my job, because I think it's something very important, in the context of all the negative aspects that I mentioned before. Does my director or dean have realistic expectations of me, knowing the hours that I have to work per week compared to the tasks that I'm supposed to accomplish? Here, I could also add actually, do I have realistic expectations of myself? Because I think that we are the worst judges to ourselves often. Another question would be our capability to deal with failure and rejection. I already showed you basically how many grants I got turned down. So you have to grow a thick skin basically to cope with having a less quantity and more quality. Is your environment healthy and supportive? Honestly, having good colleagues, having good directors, it's crucial here, because if not, they are gonna let you fall. And there is no point basically to feel that you are alone in this system. And a big question to me, it's what do I want to achieve with my career? Because I showed you before basically the stellar career of my mentors, the high impact that they had in their respective careers, citations, publications. To get that, I know that I will have to sacrifice a lot of things. So I also have to question myself to what stage I want to get and what I'm willing to sacrifice within this system. And leaving these questions on the table, I want just to remark that I love my job, and that's why I continue doing it, because I think that I'm extremely lucky to be able to do something that I always wanted to do, despite all the problems associated. But it's important to keep that positive note, despite I just gave you a bit more an ugly reality of what it's this business. And thank you very much for your attention. And if you have specific questions, I will address them also in the round table.
Thank you, Sergio. That was a nice description of a researcher pathway from more thoughtful way of what the researcher is looking for doing the research. And we hope everyone to pass from the I to the we, because we are many. So I hope we can manage more doing that today even. So thank you, Sergio. Now, Annelies maybe can enlighten us more about science policy or research frameworks, how we can really embed slow science in these competitive research frameworks for funding, talking in Europe first, but more globally.
Yeah, let me just share my screen. I also want to just say thank you again for inviting me to this. I'm going to see whether this works. And slideshow. So let me know if you cannot see my slides. Otherwise, I'm going to just presume that it's working. So yeah, like I think everyone else who's at this event, I'm quite passionate about the idea of slow science. I'm going to very briefly give a little bit of background on why I became passionate about it, and then I'll get into indeed the more directions that we could be heading in, what we're already doing really well in terms of policy. From my personal perspective. So I'm speaking now very much as I'm not the voice of the Commission in this Around the World webinar. But once upon a time, I was also a PhD candidate. As was already said, I was also working in archaeology and museum studies. I felt I had no clue about how academia worked, or if I did, it was a small inkling. And I saw that a lot of my peers, they, when they were speaking to their supervisors were very much kind of these high and mighty figures on a dais who were talking about their publication metrics, who were saying, like has already been said by Sergio, the next grant and really putting all this pressure. So I guess like Sergio was saying about colleagues, because as Sergio said, he himself takes a very different approach, which I like, to his PhD candidates. And I saw the effect that this was having on them, their aspirations. Everyone, I feel, goes into a PhD feeling very, or at least I did, feeling very hopeful, very excited, very passionate. And then it is really sad to see that this kind of a very heavy structure of producing quickly, publish or perish, has a real impact on the motivation of scientists. And I was actually very lucky, because I also started out as a very inquisitive PhD candidate. But my supervisors were very different, and they also taught me a very different approach. They valued not just teaching, but also mentoring. They were cheerleaders for their PhD candidates and their postdoctoral researchers. They were teaching, but not in a didactic way, but in a kind of working together and helping each other way. And that was really inspiring for me. But then what I saw for them was that all of these incredible things that they were putting a lot of time and care into doing was actually not rewarded. It wasn't seen as part of the essential work that scientists did. It was seen as a distraction. It was slowing them down. So even though this made me very, very happy, and it helped me to complete my PhD, seeing this experience actually made me think, okay, in the long run, do I want to be in this kind of academic system where these amazing things are not rewarded? Or do I want to try and find a way to change that system and to support researchers differently? So this is also one of the reasons why I ended up leaving academia. And I think it's kind of someone said this recently at a meeting that I was at, and it really resonated with me, and I wrote it down. The idea of research being a collective endeavor, and everyone who contributes to that collective endeavor needs to be recognized as being part of that team. And if you're a team and you go together, you go much further. Like, you may go faster alone, But you go further if you're going together and you're recognizing all of the different aspects of research. And that includes reflection. That includes taking the time to really mentor someone and care for them. So for me, that was really my motivation to get into slow science. And so after doing my PhD, I moved to Belgium, which is also where I'm from. And I found this amazing slow science Belgium movement. And they wrote a manifesto. And I found that a lot of the concepts in their manifesto really resonated with me. I also think that a really important thing in trying to embed slow science into your practice, especially as an early career researcher, is finding a community. Because, you know, alone it can feel very much like martyrdom, like you're giving up something and the rest of the research community is trying to move at breakneck speed. But if you find a community, you'll actually see that that's not the case. There's so many people who are questioning how that structure is built and what we're doing and how we can do it better. And for me, that community was the Slow Science Belgium community. And so now in my policy work, I see a lot of the elements from this Slow Science Manifesto being represented. So one of the first points that they make is, you know, science is not a business. And so I'm in the MCAA unit, and one of the events that we do every year is Science is Wonderful. And when we speak to both the scientists and the people who attend this big science fair, we ask them, why is science wonderful? And all of the reasons are, you know, it helps us to discover new things. We explore new places. We're learning from each other. We're learning together. None of them are about like, none of these things that make science so inspirational are the publications that we're putting out, the numbers. So I like looking back at the little cards that we get from these events to remind myself, you know, why is science? Why am I passionate about science? Why is it important to me? So this, I guess, links, I talked about Science is Wonderful just now, but also to the idea that science is at the service of society as a whole. So even though we are communicating a lot within the scientific community, which is extremely important, sharing knowledge, building on each other's knowledge, there is also an aspect of taking the time to actually think, okay, the science that I'm doing within my group, you know, what impact does it have? What impact could it have? How could I communicate it differently? I know that this is a huge extra burden. And as Sergio said, you know, you only have so many hours in the week. And if you're adding public outreach, but I think this is also part of why we have to argue for slow science, because we need to be given the time to do these things. There needs to be an acknowledgement that you can't do it all, but that these things are also important. So these are just kind of a few different, on the side, you can see a few different initiatives. Two of them that come from the MSCA, and then one that's a wider European Commission initiative, the Knowledge Valorization Platform, which can also help in thinking, okay, this research that I'm doing, what are the different ways in which I can bring it to a different public? I can let it have a different type of resonance. And I can share links at the end of my presentation as well for all of this. Another point in the Slow Science Manifesto is knowledge as a commons. And for me, and I've already written about this in the recent kind of newsletter that was focusing on open science. For me, open science is essential to this. The idea that the knowledge that we produce is meant to be a public good, that we're producing it in order to advance society as a whole. So, you know, open science for that is really, really important. Publish and open access, especially making sure that your research reaches a very wide public, but also that the way that you're doing research is something that you're thinking about making accessible. So that's why open science is also much broader than just open access. And I know that people, we still think a lot about journals in terms of H-index, and that's still something that we're being evaluated on. But there are tools that are available, of course, like the Open Research Europe, in order to avoid these kinds of these alternative publication outlets where you can do open science, you can see knowledge as a commons, but only if you pay us first. So I think that these kinds of initiatives, even though they're definitely not perfect yet, show that funders are actually trying to move in a direction that enables scientists to do these kinds of good practices with less of a negative impact on their careers. And then because I'm the open science person, I had to put this in, and I don't have time to explain it, I realize now. But I also wanted to say that there's, beyond just these publishing platforms, there's also so many other ways of making your science open. And you should really take the time to explore them, because it's not something, especially for me coming from the humanities, that we necessarily were taught about. But now when I look back at my research, I'm thinking of all the different, data sets that I could have made available, or the ways in which I could have used other public data. And it's a missed opportunity that I feel that I wasn't able to take advantage of. And beyond that, I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of videos about things like citizen science as well on the MCAA platform, but that's of course also an essential part of it, of who gets to create the data. And now I'm at the penultimate part of the presentation. So all about accountability over profitability. And again, all of these things link together. But here, the thing that kind of resonates most with me is this idea of how we're assessed. And it's been both in Sandra's presentation and in Sergio's presentation, I could hear it, you're trying to create a different culture, but the way you're assessed is still based on these metrics. So how do you kind of balance in that? And I'm maybe not the right person to talk, because I left academia, so I didn't. But there are so many different initiatives that are trying to push for that. You have the San Francisco Declaration, which is kind of the global one on the reform of research assessment, away from just metrics to recognizing more scientific inputs. But within Europe, we also have Kawara, which I think is doing amazing things. It's not just the agreement itself, but there's booster projects trying to test out different ways of assessing research. You also have, alongside the kind of assessment procedures, also the way researchers are presenting themselves, these narrative CVs. So there's a lot actually going on at a funder level that has the potential to gain enough momentum to really change the culture, even though it feels very slow right now. And then I would be remiss to not also mention the Charter for Researchers. I think there's researchers who don't realize that it's written black on white, kind of what the good practices are. So when you're in your institution, and many institutions also have committed to following this if they're doing a project that's funded by the European Commission. These are good practices. Many of them focus on well-being, focus on equity, diversity, and inclusion, all of these elements that are also making up how I at least see slow science. And they're really enshrined in this charter. So also having a look at that and then seeing, okay, my institution, what are we doing to actually achieve this, and what can I maybe contribute to in order to bring that further. So here's maybe a little bit of a summary, because the last bit of the Slow Science Manifesto is all about what can we actually do in practice. And I've already mentioned several of these. So how are we demonstrating excellence? What are the assessment procedures? Are we promoting collaboration? It's already been mentioned, this idea of interdisciplinarity, which of course is essential to MSCA, but as anyone who's done an interdisciplinary project knows, it takes time. You have to get to know each other's discipline in order to do good science. And then maybe more towards the end, these providing space for inquiry, which also means providing time. And this is something that maybe, especially now with the ERC having their 7-year mega grants, I feel like that's something that is being taken into account. And several other funders have beat us to it, I guess, but in the European Commission, that is being taken into account now moving forward. And then we hope that the scientific community will also keep pushing for making sure that careers for researchers are sustainable. They're not just attractive in terms of the salary that you have for 2 years, but that we're dealing with this element of precarity, which leads to fast science, because if you only have a 2-year contract and you immediately have to prove yourself and have a new project, that means you don't have the time to think and sit and really work with the science and feel out who your collaborators could be. And there maybe I can, and now my daughter is coming to me. So I'm gonna just stop here instead of saying my final words, and also be a little bit slow and respond to her. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Annelies. We couldn't think of better slide closing the speaker says. You include everything. Congratulations. So one word that you wrote, actually, what is excellence? We want to do excellent research. This is what is taking the grants for. What means excellence? So there are some keywords we still carry from other schemes, and we have to change how we perceive this, the research culture. So what we mean is excellence. For example, the ERC grants and everything, it's about excellence. Anyway, I will open I should open the microphone for our participants, so to have more interactive discussion. I had a lot of questions that you as speakers, you have seen, but I think just raising hands and getting questions, maybe that is more effective, since we can overrun maybe 15 minutes, hopefully, because we have filled the 1 hour of webinar, but doesn't matter, we can continue a bit more. Yeah, thank you, Aziz, for your support and your allowance to continue a bit. And especially, maybe I can start with one question. What shifts we can do to help early career researchers that still are the first steps, and there it is to be defined what pathway to follow, what's supposed to be excellent, how to, because you were all speakers, we started, Sandra is professor, established, Sergio is turning to a more established professor, and Annelies more from science policy, fighting for these principles that we're all taking care of. So that's why we had a very nice view of everything. The point is what we can do to help early mid-career researchers that have already faced all the difficulties, how we can change everything, how someone can start doing research. So just a starting point, and then I can take the questions.
So I can make a word of that, actually, because I think, I can talk from personal experience. But I think that to a certain extent, to have a more stronger mentorship, when you are starting the professorship, actually, it's very helpful, because you need to have someone that doesn't expect anything in exchange, that without any ultimate a purpose, like a selfish purpose, is going to help you, and it's going to basically ease that introduction to the system that perhaps for that person was more complicated, lacking that figure of a mentor. So I think that my just to cut it short, a good mentor
mentorship
would be something that
talking about early careers, because it's more pure. All we are starting like that. We ignore the difficulties and we are more enthusiastic and
exactly just to avoid the burnout. Yeah, so that's something that I would highlight.
I would also highlight to invest more in early career researchers. For instance, in Spain, some years ago, there was a program, a very good research program for early careers researchers, 5-year program, and then the possibility to consolidate. And this was canceled for another initiative that is not so beneficial for early career students. And also to me, it's so important how you assess research, not to incentivate hyper accumulation, putting limits to the publications you can list in a research proposal, and ignoring metrics. Just go to the project, what this project brings to my field and to social knowledge in general. I think with these just two measures, much could be gained.
Yeah, it's easier to change the research culture, but it's difficult to change the institutional and funding mechanisms.
But for instance, for ERCs limit, I guess everybody knows what ERCs are. The applications, the European Research Councils, the programs you have for starting, consolidator, and advanced, they limit the number of publications that you can list. Or the Marie Curies, I have been, the MSCAs, I have been assessing Marie Curies, and I never put the stress on the publications. I look better to the project. And I think we all should do that. And of course, this means more time for assessing research. It's like a circle because you don't have time to assess research. So you look for indicators that are objective in theory. But if we break that circle, then we will be able to assess better research and to give to our young researchers better lives.
Yeah, and also with the narrative CVs. But yes, it's agreed that this takes more time because you have to read pages instead of just one list of.
Yes. I'm ready to make the effort.
Thank you. That's.
I know many professors that would like to go for that kind of academic life.
Perhaps there is a question in a chat, if we can address this one, from Miranda. Can I read it?
Yeah, please.
So how can the slow science movement work towards equity for researchers with chronic conditions or disabilities? Thinking about ECRs who physically cannot work 70 hours per week and how they are systematically excluded.
It's a difficult question to answer because I have also reflected very much on this. I have colleagues that have had to leave academia because because functional diversity, sorry. And if we slow down, we have to realize that people that doesn't conform to normativity brings very much into science because they see research problems from another perspective. So I would implement, of course, discrimination measures, and slowing down would permit to incorporate people that doesn't conform in whatever sense, because this is good for science. It's not only for social justice, it's good for science, at least for the humanities, because you see problems, you see research questions from another point of view.
So I just want to chip in here and just give another perspective to Sandra's comment, because I think that at least from the academic system in Canada, there is a lot of power in how the unit at the university is managed. And the director of the unit or the dean actually is going to determine a lot the amount of tasks that you have, the amount of expectations, and what you have to fulfill. So if you have a person there, a dean, that is aware that you can have depression, you need to go on maternity leave, and even if you come back to work, having a baby is not going to make you as available as you were before. Many problems. Like my dad passed away last year in Spain, and I had to basically abandon my lab for 1 month to take care of things. So you need to have certain also like a flexibility from your directors to manage this type of stuff. I think that that's key. The problem, and that's why I'm bringing this up, is that the directors have pressure from above also to fill those gaps. And at the end of the day, if 300 credits of classes needs to be given and you have 10 professors like hired, you need to split those hours, and you're not going to have more resources to have like more people teaching. So at the end of the day, I think everything reduces to money and to keep people happy with the money that they are earning, because our salaries in academia are also nothing comparable to what I would be earning at a pharmaceutical company, for instance. So how can you basically retain clinical professors, for instance, that are willing to reduce the salary compared to what they would be earning at a clinic, that are willing also to cope with all these extra hours, you know, when you are not having like a easier times from above. So I think that here, like, you need really to escalate to the point in which when the budgets are established, this should be taken into consideration, that if you have a professor with depression, with like a big problem, you have the funds basically to hire another person to take care of all those tasks just to keep functioning the faculty, just as an example.
Thank you, Sergio. That's very good points, all of this. And maybe I would like to stress out the difference between fundamental science that needs more time to reflect and do something, and applied science that usually attracts all the funding money, that is much easier. But without fundamental science, we cannot proceed. So somehow we need to go back to the roots and question why we do something like this research. And also to give us time to build collaborations, because the teams, it is what they bring the result. And for this, I think Annelies mentioned that we need time. And in the end of the day, if we are participating in big teams, so I have to talk about my personal experience of working at CERN. It's experiments that are consisting of maybe about 2,000 authors. And at the end of the day, when it is to apply for a job at university, they are asking you what you did. And it's very difficult to prove. So because it's a teamwork and it's a chain, it is who did the analysis at the end and found the Higgs, or who build the software or the detector, or all the chains in between, the middleware. So it's quite complex. And just the people at the institutes, when they hire personnel, they have to understand this complexity. And it's not always easy. Even people come from the same experiments because they use the easy way to assess the research. It's just my personal testimony here. But yes, Annelies, please.
Yeah, maybe just quickly, because I loved your point also about there needing to be a balance and space for fundamental research, because I think that's, yeah, again, speaking on a very personal level, I think that's something that very easily falls away when there's seen to be scarcity in funding, when research becomes political. It's very quick for that to be cut away. And then suddenly something happens, like academic freedom in a certain country is curbed and certain research fields are seen as no-go zones. And then everyone's suddenly reminded, oh, wait, no, it's actually super important that researchers can be led by curiosity. This actually does bring us forward in ways we can't even expect. You know, if as COVID as an example, within MSCA,
mRNA research,
there were so many projects that were underway well before. And then when it was suddenly a scramble of like, oh, what are we doing about COVID? We need to fund projects that deal with this. It was like, no, but we've actually been funding projects that contribute to this. And it's so essential that is there and that there's space for that, because we don't know what the issues are going to be in 3 years. So we need scientists to be thinking creatively and to have the space to do that. So yeah, I totally agree with you. I love that you brought it up.
Yeah, also this competitiveness, all the packages about what is competitive at the end. I mean, it's not all applied. Sergio, we are monopolized. I would like to encourage our participants to speak up, because we don't have a lot of time, but please, Sergio, make your point.
No, just one topic, and I just want to throw it more than discussing, you know, it's like, who's responsible of that change? You know, like who's gonna basically slow down? So I already mentioned in my presentation, I'm not putting that pressure I have onto me, all my students. So I'm basically absorbing all that pressure to make them happier in a way. That who basically can
Or between two pressures to please to help your students, and then
exactly. So that's the topic that I was just like launching.
yeah, that's important to say. The extra burden for you. Giovanna Lima, you raise your hand.
Yes, hi. Thank you for the presentation and the event. It's really wonderful to be here and listen why our work is so important as Dora. So I suppose our approach is a whole systems approach. So to answer Sergio's question on who is responsible, our perception is everyone's responsible and everyone has a role to play. And to Sandra's point, since she is in a position to be called in for committees and things like that, when she's in the committee rooms, she can take a different approach. And then Sergio, when you are in supervising your students, you can take a different role. And then when we are here having this conversation, we are also taking leadership from an individual perspective. So it is we take this kind of system change approach. So we will need everyone really. There will be people who, for these changes, are not needed anymore. They have already either succeeded or they don't see the need for change, and that's okay. There will always be colleagues like that, but if we can count as many of you raising the Dora flag or the Quara flag or the Barcelona Declaration flag. There are many flags you can choose nowadays to raise on these many points because they're all related initiatives as well. So I suppose we're trying in the background also to coordinate, but I don't know. So when Sergio's question on who is it that will do the change, I would say it's all of us. Thank you for everything and the opportunity to be here.
Thank you, Giovanna. So it's important in the end to have more scientists in the policy making decision centers that can change. An example is Annelies, that had more experience from her background and then shifting to more science policy, then can make a change. That is this what we are trying to do through the policy group and MCAA as well.
And what we see also, though, is that there are many countries that are quite independent to make the institutions are quite independent to make the change. So Sergio, for instance, mentioned Canada. Canada doesn't have a national system that regulates their whole. So there's no need to be a policy change for things to change. It's actually each institution that could choose to change. Thankfully, the tri-agency, which are the funders in Canada, are now moving towards the narrative CV. So that will trigger some changes in the institutions. It's the same in the US. So there are some countries that we see that the policy level is the right level that needs to change, like Spain, for instance, that has a national system that regulates how research careers are assessed. But in other countries, it's more flexible. So that's also, I suppose, why the countries are so different in their journeys. But you're absolutely right. And that's why I say that we need everyone, but the scientists in academia are the ones making the decisions. It's the department heads, it's the vice chancellors of research. They already have a lot of agency, I suppose. That's what I'm trying to say, if you know what I mean.
With the institutions also to comply to some rules or this code, researchers code, like Annelies presented, code for researchers, that everybody should be in the same line. Because that is accomplishment at the end. So not every institute will follow different, quite independent, uncontrollable.
Although, sorry, I very much agree with what you are saying. And I think this is the only way for a good science. But I still feel that even when we are conscious and aware, it's very difficult to break the dynamics in which we are inserted. And many of my colleagues, I find always exhausted colleagues in the corridors. And when I ask, how are you? I'm very tired. I cannot anymore. I need a pause. And this is very common with professors. And I always think about this. On the one hand, we are the only ones that can break this, but we cannot do on individual basis, because on individual basis, we can create like islands of different ways of making research. Maybe if you have many islands, you will have a different culture, but we need to go beyond that, and we need a policy making that supports or that breaks the rhythm, because otherwise it's difficult for us to exit these dynamics. And we all see the problem. Well, not everybody. Some people are very happy with this competitive rhythm. But most of my colleagues, I would say, they would like to live in a different academia, but they don't know how.
We agree. Sabina, you want to make your point?
Yeah, thank you very much, Sandra, for mentioning this. I'll continue here just to kind of, you said like we would like to live in a different academia, but most people probably leave academia because they would want to reorganize their lives, right? And I feel like that part of the slow science approach would also be kind of this understanding of what percentage of your students will actually do science like you in the future. And to have this awareness as a professor, as a mentor, as a senior colleague, that, you know, if you leave academia and you don't continue in science, like you won't be a failure. That's not a failure. And you know, you'll be fine, which is kind of still not present within academic circles. And I feel that like there is then kind of two options. Some people who leave and like never return academia and like turn away with a bitter face of like, this is definitely not something I ever want to engage in my life. Or the second, like, for example, Annelies, who maybe has seen a lot of things that have problem in academia and then try to influence it from policy level or like changing the structures on a policy level and like kind of be advocate in different manners. And I think that like this kind of brings back together of like people we need people in academia, both women, men of all genders, of all abilities, of all races, of all religions or whatever beliefs, to kind of support the idea to slow down the train and like all the pressures that people are going through, but also the people outside it who are like on the policy making level and like work together towards a change in the future. Thanks.
So thanks. So all we agree on that we need to make changes, but then we have to think how to communicate this with the policymakers. If somebody will ask us, maybe that's like a takeaway message, or what action, what we can suggest, what to prioritize. If somebody asks us what you want to do to support slow science or more sustainable and reflective research culture, maybe one word from each speaker. It's a difficult question, but if you had this chance and somebody would have asked you, what you would have answered. And maybe with this, if there is no urgent other comments, maybe we can close the meeting soon. I don't know, Sandra, are you ready to?
Yes, maybe. I cannot find the hands up. Today, nothing seems
That's
to be
fine, no
working in
problem.
my
We are not so
computer.
formal.
But I would say, I have different ideas, but I would say valuing critical thought, long-term relevance, and also researchers' well-being over getting money. If we can change that.
And balance between our research work, our life, our mental health, because right now it's quite unbalanced, the whole. Sergio, please.
So just to add a little bit more, and without wanting to monopolize, but I think that there is a very good indicative of how healthy is an environment in that sense when a lab is popular and all the students want to go to that lab, when you see that the students are around, that they want to be involved in committees. So I think that there is like certain elements that are good, like health indicatives, and that actually like we should learn actually from that to be able to transition to standardizing that, and not like other culture in which professors are forcing students to spend weekends to get data for Monday and so on. So not everything is publications, and I think that that's the first thing. And as a matter of fact, I'm bringing this up because the CHR, for instance, which is one of the main agencies of funding in Canada, now when you are reviewing a paper, you are not allowed to consider the impact factor of the paper. You will just consider the publication and the quality of the publication, and they are becoming more and more strict. However, we are human and we all know what it means to publish in Nature compared to publishing +1, just to give an example. And at the end of the day, we have a lot of bias that keeps us from that. And I think that Ashish wants to cut there.
No, actually, I have a question. I would like to play the devil's advocate here and ask, like, so don't you think like going towards and following slow science and not caring that much about publications would reduce the quality of science, would reduce the breakthroughs in science, and reduce the Nature publications that people have, or only a certain segment?
I think
If not, why? Why not? Why wouldn't it affect that?
In my view, it's just the reverse. Is to have the pressure to publish so much what is decreasing the quality of science. Because to publish original, relevant, and creative work, you need time. You cannot have 100 original creative ideas every month. So what happens is that people publish what has already been published, or just research that does not imply critical reflection. So for the humanities to slow down the rhythm of publication, I find it is the only way that it doesn't miss, it doesn't lose its critical edge. I don't know if this answers to your question, Ashish.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, and I can just jump in. I think that some of the Nobel Prize winners have been really outspoken and did their testimonials that if they would have lived in this kind of publish or perish culture where you need to have these original ideas or pretend to have them like all the time, they would have never been able to like get to their breakthrough because it sometimes required decades. And like it wouldn't be published before. It was an idea that needed like a long-term work that even today an ERC or MCAA are far from supporting. So like to building a team, to building a long-term investment into your research group or team and developing this idea towards the breakthrough, that took a lot of time and not just a simple project or a quick publication.
Yes, I totally agree. I give the example, I think it was Derrida. I don't remember. No, it was a mathematician that only published one paper across his life, but this was so seminal that he changed the paradigm. But of course, he wouldn't have survived in the fast academia.
Yes, thank you for all. I think we left with Annelies, maybe to close the meeting with her. You are the last one, so you have to close to make the conclusion of the meeting with your key takeaway action methods, or how to name it. Okay, you can open your microphone when you are ready.
Yeah, sorry. I feel like the timing of the screaming is always terrible.
Don't worry.
I did kind of, yeah. And I love the mention as well of the noble scientist, because that's something that we noticed as well. Like the idea of having this time to go in depth actually makes your research quality and impact higher, even if it doesn't seem that way. And I think that that's important in that slow science sees science as a process. So publications and patents are part of that process. They're not an ultimate outcome that we need to strive for, and we need as many of them as possible. We need to think about how can we make them part of the process in order to make science that is a team effort of enriching our society, creating knowledge, better. So that for me is kind of key, and any kind of policy that enhances that, so gives scientists time, that recognizes the process, the collaboration, is going to help that. So yeah, that's the end for me, and now I will go and deal with the mama.
I think we will close the meeting now. Assis probably will be telling us that we are half an hour over time, but it was very fruitful meeting and gave us a lot to think. And I think most of us will have the same experience and we agree upon everything, but then it's how to make an action, to make the change. So that's the next steps, the difficult part. Thank you very much, everybody being here, the speakers, Sabina, the North American chapter, supporting a lot this idea, and Assis that hosting us very successful webinar today. And thank you very much. And you will hear from us soon, I hope, again, to continue thinking and deliberating about these important policy issues, and not only science policy, and everything that reassures the balance for the researchers' lives. Thank you. And